Hi, I'm Randy Altman with Post Perspective. We're at NAB 2014, and my guest right now is Mark Sanger, the Oscar-winning editor of Gravity. So thank you for coming and sitting down with us.
Co-editor, I should say. Co-editor with Alfonso Cuarón,
Yeah, oh, okay. So obviously, you guys, how early on were you brought in on the film?
Basically, in a very, very unique situation, before we had a script. I'm not sure we had development money. We certainly didn't have a cast. We had no idea how we were going to do it, and it was myself and the director, writer, and producer Alfonso Cuarón, and co-editor, and the storyboard artist Temple, and the visual effects supervisor Tim Weber, and the four of us sat around a table and went through the script and tried to get a gauge from Alfonso of exactly how he wanted to execute the film. And the reason Alfonso had brought in a co-editor at that stage is because I think he could see that in terms of visually giving everybody an idea of what the film was what he had in his head, he needed to start putting some images together early on. And that had a bit of a snowball effect in that putting those images together and kind of doing showing everybody his vision, then started opening up questions as to how were we going to actually do this practically, logistically, virtually. And so what happened was that before we knew it, we were blocking the movie in a rough sense in the edit. We're using very sort of raw materials such as storyboards to begin with, and then kind of stickman animation, and then playing with that using Media Composer, respeeding, retiming, flopping, flipping the material that we had to then resupply that to the visual effects guys, who would then resupply us with animation, and Alfonso would rewrite. And this is all happening 18 months before we turned over with the actors. So it was a two-pronged process really, in that creatively we were getting a sense of what the film was going to be like, but we also had to supply all those guys responsible for establishing how the shoot would go together. We had to give them stuff to work from. So quite a very unique process.
So I was going to say, obviously you have probably never worked like that before.
Or again.
Yeah.
Yes.
By design, I will not.
Well, it was definitely, I don't think anybody has ever done anything like that before, and it wasn't that we set out to do something different. It was just literally Alfonso Cuarón's vision was such a unique vision that we needed to take this sort of the collaborative efforts of the entire team, and I'm talking about post-production people, production people, and pre-production departmental heads coming together to pool our knowledge and our resources and work out how to do it. So it was literally just down to the way that Alfonso wanted to execute the movie visually, the storytelling style that dictated this kind of a very different approach.
So in a sense, you sort of were thinking about the editing at the very beginning of the film, and how did it differ when you actually started editing it after the shoot?
Well, what happens is that you kind of back yourself into a corner in that because logistically the shots that we put together, the editing the edited sequences that we put together in that pre-shoot time were so locked down for the shoot. We weren't shooting any particular coverage on anything. The poor actors, Sandra and George, basically were turned up and they were shown the rudimentary sort of animated edit that we had and told you're doing that shot, and that shot today. And so what that means is that when you hit post-production officially and you've gone through and the actors have brought all this life to an otherwise lifeless edit, then you find that it's not like you can cut away to a wide shot or cut away to the teapot in the corner. You are very restricted. Well, what's interesting is that opens up, especially under with Alfonso, at the helm of this project, is that causes everybody to think differently to before. And so what we found was that we were able to edit the film, shape the film, mold the story together. But again, we had to come up with new ways of doing that, and that meant that collaborative effort with all the other departmental heads had to be tapped into again. We would come together and say, listen, I would do something in the edit with Alfonso, and then I'd take it to the other guys and say, guys, I'm not quite sure how you're going to do it, but I think you can tell that the changes Alfonso's been making today better tell the story, better serve the story, and we really need your help in doing what I had done in a sort of rudimentary fashion in the NAB.
It's amazing because the lines were really blurred for this film, like between production and post. I mean, the lines are blurring anyway, but in this film, it was all sort of intertwined.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the lines are blurring naturally. I think technology is having an impact in that way. My one concern over that is that storytelling doesn't suffer because, again, the reason that the film works, bottom line, the reason that the film works is that Alfonso never let the visuals or the editing or anything overtake the storytelling and the performance of the actors. If without the performances of the actors, they're telling the story. The film wouldn't have been wouldn't have engaged with an audience, I don't think, And so I think there is a natural progression for a kind of an evolutionary change in the way that film crews do approach filmmaking now. But it really does take some master director to ensure that remains. That the story permeates through all of that.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you one more question and then let you go. So, working with all the visual effects shots, so can you just talk about some of those challenges? Because when were you getting actual
dailies?
Completed? Yeah. I mean, when were you able to start?
About 3 weeks before the premiere. No. It was. We were working with for a long time. We were working with an edit that you wouldn't want to show anybody. Who wasn't well versed in how things can evolve in the visual effects process. It was very rough and ready, but nevertheless it was enough for those of us working with it to see what potential it could have.
Right.
And so you were by the time we were shooting, we had some locked down. The scenes were essentially blocked. The shots were blocked, and we had some emotionless maquette figures by that stage with some lighting on them.
Okay.
And that's what had been used in order to dictate the lighting and the rigs and what the actors would be doing on the stage. From that point onwards, it took almost a year, I think. Before we gradually, over that period, we started to get some shots that looked like what you see in the final movie.
Yeah.
But some of those shots really didn't come in until we were mixing. In fact, some of the shots came in after I left the production. So, the poor visual effects guys, and Tim Weber as the supervisor, they had some real work on their hands because, gradually there came a point where we all could see what the movie was going to be, and the sound was coming together, and the music was coming together, and we all saw the promise that the film had. Mm-hmm. And yet, had Tim, just delivered one shot that was slightly off, then the audience would have the audiences engaging in the story would have dropped out, and we would have lost them, even momentarily. And I think what makes an Alfonso Cuarón movie so stunning in general is that people are always engaged in his films.
Yeah.
So I think the pressure was really on Tim to not let that down.
Sure. Well, everybody seemed to perfect storm of goodness. right? Because, like you said, if one cog didn't work right, it all could have sort of.
That was the thing is, we do a lot of talking about it, but it is the fundamental truth is that it was a huge collaborative effort from a bunch of crew members who really respected each other's work, but also had a handle on what each of us, what our responsibilities are, and technically how we work. And ultimately, when you bring in the performances of Sandra and George and place those on in that environment, it was this great meeting of creative and technical minds. And as you say, had Tim screwed it up in the last moments, he would have ruined the movie.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for coming and
Not at
taking
all.
the time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Randy Altman, Post Perspective, NAB 2014.